Please comment on Jung-Pauli's Unus Mundus hypothesis. Does this correlate with quantum theory solutions to the hard problem, e.g. Penrose, Hameroff, Orch, or ORCHOR? I don't know what ORCHOR is. I know Penrose and Hameroff. I'm not an admirer of the Penrose and Hameroff attempt to reduce consciousness to microtubule function, quantum mechanics and microtubule function. I did my best to understand it. I couldn't. It seemed hollow to me. My experience has generally been, if I find something incomprehensible and hollow, it generally is. I've read better books on consciousness, like The User Illusion, which I really liked. That's The User Illusion, by the way. And Jeffrey Gray wrote a good book on consciousness as well. Jung and Pauli, I'm not going to be able to answer this question very well because I'm starting to get a bit worn out here. Wolfgang and Pauli and Jung recognized that, man, this is really a complicated problem. I don't know if I can answer this. Okay, let's try this. God, it's been years since I thought about this and wrote about it, so we'll see how I can do. You could think about this from a perspective of Piagetian constructivism. So imagine that what you confront fundamentally in the world is what is unknowable. And what is unknowable has an intrinsic meaning. It's both frightening and compelling simultaneously. It activates predator detection systems that protect you in the way that a prey animal is protected by freezing and withdrawal and that sort of thing, but it also makes you curious. So that which you do not understand, which is something that you can conceptualize as that which has not yet been made habitable world, has an intrinsic meaning. Now the question is whether the fundamental stuff of the world is that meaningful unknown or something material. You can make the case that what we recognize as material is actually a pragmatic reconceptualization of the meaning, of the ambivalent meaning of the unknowable. Now, I know that's hard. That's a hard concept, but imagine, you see, it depends on whether or not you believe that our descriptions of material reality are the superordinate descriptions of reality, or whether our conceptualization of material is actually a form of pragmatic tool use that's oriented towards our survival. And this is not an easy thing to sort out. It's something that I did try to sort out to some degree with Sam. You know, do we have an objective description of reality, and is reality something that can be objectively described, or are we using a technology that produces so-called objective representations to facilitate our tool use? It's a hard question, right? Because obviously our advanced technology, which we use in a tool-like fashion, is a consequence of our materialist science, which begs the question, is the fundamental purpose of the science descriptive or pragmatic? Now, I tend to think it's pragmatic, because I think our fundamental problem is a problem of survival. So there's a way of looking at the world where the fundamental reality is the chaotic potential that gives rise to fear and curiosity. And that's how your nervous system responds, by the way. And see, that's interesting to me, because I would say, well, it's a truism of evolutionary biology that what your nervous system is adapted to, what you're adapted to as a consequence of your 3.5 billion years of evolution, is reality, and that there's no other real way of defining it. And so the way your brain construes reality is as if what you're confronting is an indeterminate chaotic potential that first generates something like apprehension, fear, and curiosity secondarily. The apprehension to freeze you so that you don't get eaten or destroyed, and the curiosity to allow you to engage with what's unknown and to transform it into habitable territory, which in large part consists of tools. Now, the Unus Mundus that Pauli and Jung talked about seems to me to be associated with this idea of that chaotic potential. And I think that's related to the physicist Wheeler's proposition that the fundamental reality of the world is information rather than material. That material is a secondary, what would you call it? It's a secondary manifestation of information. And I think that what we confront in the world, see, I don't think we're driven by the past or determined by the present. I think what we do is we apprehend the potential of the future, the chaotic potential of the future. And I think that that's associated with the tohu vabohu, which is the chaotic potential that God confronted with the Logos at the beginning of time in Genesis. I think the Genesis story is a reflection of that fundamental truth. And I think that that capability characterizes us. And so the Unus Mundus is the informational substrate that constitutes the world before it's divided into psyche, so that would be spirit, that'd be human spirit and consciousness, and material. So there's something underneath that, and this is what Jung and Pauli were driving at in my understanding. There's something underneath that, which is the pre-division unity of reality. And that's something like the tohu vabohu, or the teom, which is etymologically cognate, by the way, with the word Tiamat. And Tiamat is the goddess that the Mesopotamian creator god Marduk confronted and cut into pieces and made the world from. So that's all outlined in Maps of Meaning, although not so much the Unus Mundus hypothesis. And I haven't thought about that for a while. I wrote about it, but these were in papers I never published because they were too damn complicated. And I tried to publish them a couple of times, but people didn't understand what I was talking about. And, I hadn't even thought about, oh, man. So this is a different way of conceptualizing the world. I think it's a phenomenological perspective. And I don't know what to make of it. So think about it this way. So it looks like your left hemisphere is specialized for operation in territory that you understand. So it's specialized for operation in those places where behavioral patterns have been made habitual and explicit. Whereas the right hemisphere is specialized for response to chaos itself, to the unknown. And what that implies is that the division that's expressed, for example, in the yin-yang symbol, which is essentially chaos and order, is actually represents something fundamental about the structure of reality. Now you might say, well, only the structure of reality insofar as biological organisms conceptualize it, but I don't know if we can talk about the structure of reality outside the conceptions of biological organisms. Like if you're a strict believer in objective material reality, in the transcendent existence of strict material reality, then you might say, well, of course you could talk about it because strict material reality exists in the absence of biology and consciousness. But it isn't so obvious to me that material reality does exist in the absence of consciousness, because I can't conceptualize what existence would mean in the absence of consciousness. Like, is there time? Is there duration? Is there size? All of these things are relative in some sense. All of these things presuppose a conscious observer, even in the materialist description. So it looks to me like what reality is this unus mundus that Jung and Pauli were pointing to. It's chaotic potential. Now, I also think that we treat each other that way. So if I'm treating you properly, then I treat you as if you're a moral agent who's actively engaged in the transformation of the chaotic potential that manifests itself as the dawning of the future and that attracts your attention. I treat you as if you're an active moral agent engaged in making the moral decisions that determine how that potential is going to manifest itself. And if I don't treat you that way, then I'm patronizing. I don't grant you your full stature as a sovereign being. And I impinge upon your intrinsic value, the same value that allows you to claim the existence of natural rights and also the presence, I would say, of natural responsibility. So I treat you as if you're, well, I would say, made in the image of God in the Genesis terminology, that you are part of the process that turns the tohu abohu, which I never pronounced properly, into habitable order. And I think that that's the unus mundus. And I think that that's reflected in your neurological structure. And I think the fact that it's reflected in your neurological structure and in the neurological structure of animals with this, almost universal dual hemisphere neurological structure, which also, by the way, is something that's necessary even in neural networks, which is where we got the idea for plasticity and stability, by the way, in the big 5 aspect scale models and the higher order personality factors. I think the fact that bifurcation is reflected in neurology is a reflection of the fact that it exists in reality. Now, of course, defining reality is no simple thing, you can think about it as an objective materialist, but you can also think of reality as the sum total of that which is experienced. And those aren't the same things. They aren't the same fundamental presuppositions. And I think that we've predicated our society, insofar as our society is functional, on the proposition that each individual is a sovereign entity, what would you say, characterized by a spark of divinity that uses the responsible, truthful word to confront the chaos of potential and generate the habitable order that is good. I think we act that out.